$1 million. Ain't gonna happen. Right. So, and you know, we've done things like with this money, like Clayton got a
Gazebo?
community clock.
Oh, yeah, the
They got
clock
the
and
clock.
gazebo.
Yeah,
Birdwood
and
Park.
Little Creek, or not Little Creek, Little Creek got the dog park, and that was like 30-some thousand.
33, 35, something like
And
that.
Frederica for the senior center for that park there, I forgot how much that was.
22 or 24,000.
It was at least that, yeah.
How do you know?
And then
My district.
Okay, that's amazing. I thought
Wyoming, their park there, they put in a.
That park,
Oh,
the
okay.
handicap park.
Oh, man, you're
It
on.
was like 125,000. That's like the most we've given, I think.
150?
Well, we did give 250,000 Boys and Girls Club.
That's true.
But it was prompted by something about the library in Dover?
The City of Dover Library had been promised money, so then they came in here and they got $1 million. And then after that, the commissioners did not ever want to be put in that position again. Because then 2 other libraries came out of the woodwork wanting $1 million.
Okay.
So then they decided to create Policy 30.
Me. Wasn't here for that one.
So
Thank God.
do the policy 30s, do they go on the levy court agenda for approval at a business meeting?
Yes.
So
Normally what we do, excuse me, Ken, normally what we do is we have someone come into a committee meeting and explain what they want. And matter of fact, that's what I've told the folks from City of Dover. I'm gonna put them on the committee agenda for the end of this month, and then have it go to business meeting
Okay.
after that. But they have a representative come and say, this is what we want, and this is why we want it, and this is why we need your help, and this is what we're putting into it. Can you help us?
So the only thing I would add is there going to be times where when someone's in the room asking is not always the best time to have the conversation about how you feel about it.
Well,
So
we don't-
if
we don't have-
we
we don't
can
have to.
workshop it or take it through leadership and try to get a feel, because if the board's really not feeling the request, probably good to give them that feedback, because I hate people coming in running into a brick wall.
The other thing is we've never created an application or anything related to it or the rules because they don't get the money up front.
To reimburse.
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. Well, we're right at the 7 o'clock time for the
I guess we are.
thing to start, but I really appreciate the guidance, because it was, especially Susan walking all the way down here to join us.
Yeah. Okay, it is now 7:03 p.m. We are at a scheduled committee meeting for Kent County Levy Court in room 203. All 7 commissioners and the county administrator and the county attorney are here. So the first item on the agenda, we do have quorum. First thing on the agenda is Public Works Committee, Commissioner Hertz. And I imagine
Diana's right there.
It's like sitting next to Susan up here.
Bring her right on down and let her get right into it.
get right into it. Hello, Diana. How are you?
Hello, Commissioners.
Good.
I'm doing fine.
I think you gotta press that thing and get that little.
It's already, it's set.
All right.
So this evening, we're going to be talking about our long-range wastewater master plan. The last one was revised around 2002. The time period for the long-range wastewater master plan is about 20 years. And this evening, we have with us Dan String from KCI, who did the work on the long-range wastewater master plan. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
So I have the presentation here. I don't know how far this can go. I can come over there, sit with you guys.
Sit
Yeah.
down, you
I
can
think
work right from here.
it'll still work. Okay. All right. So I'll work off of the big screen here. So good evening. I've met a lot of you before, but my name's Dan String. I'm with KCI Technologies. We are a consulting firm located right here in Dover. I am a proud resident of Felton. So this is my hometown and home area. So all of these projects, anytime I get a chance to work with the county, it's always a pleasure for me. And it really kind of hits home for all of us. So I'm happy to come before you representing our team, and not only our team as KCI, but also the Public Works Department. There's a lot of people that participated in this activity. There's also all of the, you'll see, I'll discuss all the municipalities that contribute to the system as far as contract users had a role in this plan as well, because obviously they have big contributions. We worked closely with them. A couple topics as far as the master plan goes. The name is in and of itself, the master plan. You've got a large system. This is one of the biggest assets that you have in the county. A single report or a single plan couldn't begin to identify every detail that you have in your system. The goal of these long-term plans is to try and set the roadmap and sort of make sure that you're heading in the right direction. And then there's a lot of individual projects that roll out of that. There's a lot of individual projects that roll into this in order to create the overall master plan. So our goals here are not necessarily to, we won't have every detail, but we want to make use of as much information as we have available to us and be able to consolidate that into a document that becomes usable moving forward. Oh, that didn't let me do it. Okay, there we go. Thank you. You might, I don't know if it's going to work or if I'm going to have to just cue you. So we'll figure it out. So again, the last update, as Diana mentioned, was in 2000, and then sort of updated in 2002. So a lot of things have happened since that time period. So we're looking at a big picture review of the entire system, 20-year outlook of the major components. All right, that worked. So the plan for today is just kind of give you a little heads up and planning for the future about what's going on. We did multiple presentations to the Sewer Advisory Board as well. So they have vested interest in what's going on there. So we've given a couple presentations to them, and this is our opportunity to share with you what we've learned from those. So we're going to talk a little bit about total capacity, location of where we focused our efforts, the collection conveyance, which we're going to refer to as linear assets. They're things like if you saw on a map, you can see lines going everywhere. We'll talk about vertical assets, which are, if you were looking at a map, are dots on a map, but that dot may encompass a lot of money and a lot of activity. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the capital improvement programming and funding that you have in place, and kind of how that may evolve over time. So I'm gonna try and stay at a pretty high level here and move pretty quickly. If there's anything that anyone wants more detail about, certainly stop me and ask me, or catch me afterwards, or I live here, so you can always hunt me down. So just a quick overview. This is just these. You don't need to worry about too much detail over here, but our attempt was to use population consortium data, not make up our own data for the projections. Look specifically at the major contributors, and then also in the Kent County unincorporated areas, which is the last line of the first part of the chart there. The big message at the bottom here is the projections to the treatment plant, because that's your major asset, and ultimately we need to get rid of a certain amount of flow here. So you see the 2018 to 2022 number there of 13.5 million gallons a day. That was the average in that time period, and we use our population projections to tell us what we're going to look at for the next 20 years. And we're estimating about 19.5 million gallons a day based on population projection. That doesn't account specifically for I&I, which is rainwater getting into your system. It doesn't specifically account for if there was a high-use industry that comes in. But what we saw was from the previous projections in the previous 20 years, both of those factors were well within the estimates that were done 20 years ago that were strictly based on population. So we followed the same methodology, and actually the projections from 20 years ago would have had you over 20 million already. And so they were certainly plenty conservative. So we feel good about this number. The number here, if it's plus or minus a little bit, is probably not going to be the end of the world for your big decisions.
So where this is gonna go, and it'll be repeated later on, is the plant design is 20 MGD.
But there's a few things that we need to keep it at 20. So service areas, where did we look? What were we trying to focus on? Mostly in the growth zone for obvious reasons. That's where most of your infrastructure is. Most of the growth that we're seeing now is expected within the municipal boundaries. There's not going to be, we don't see as much going outside of those municipal boundaries. I was in for part of the meeting earlier today, and you're kind of pushing activity to those areas, which makes a lot of sense. But this is different than 2002. So in 2002, there was a lot of areas that were going to be major expansions. New sewer districts, Kittumick, Kenton area. Even bringing in, at that point, City of Harrington wasn't connected. and wasn't going to your treatment plant. So it had its own treatment plant. A lot of different things then than where we are now. So now we're not looking at those major expansions like that was a major focus of the 2002 report. We still have a few underserved communities. I use that language because that's what DENREC uses as language for a couple small communities that probably need some help. And then, so think failing septic systems. There's going to be a few more of those that maybe not identified by DENREC. And one of the major components of this activity was a hydraulic model. For many years, there was bits and pieces and trying to be able to understand kind of what was happening within your system. There was a separate project on the books to actually develop a hydraulic model. It's a pretty sophisticated computer model based on your GIS. We were able to incorporate that into the scope and get that job done.
So Dan, on the, whose committee is this, Paul? What do you quantify as a major expansion? Because bringing in Kenton and bringing in Kitsummick, you're looking at a few hundred homes. But I have a subdivision going into Camden that's going to be 1,000.
So a lot depends on whether that is going to be connected in to the county system. A lot of the subdivisions, like somebody mentioned earlier, are not being connected in. As far as how we would define those things, those are planned activities within certain sewer districts already. So the way I'm describing it here is more like, hey, there's an existing community out there that we need to go and bring in, not so much the growth. So we're anticipating that the growth is captured in that previous slide, but where you have an existing community, or like when you brought in Harrington.
So just looking in my district, the town of Camden is very growth oriented.
Yeah.
They have expanded almost all the way down to Wyoming.
Yeah.
Or down to Woodside.
Yeah.
Where Viola's like, we're not ever gonna annex any more than we have right now.
Yeah.
So I know that but that growth in Camden is going to be probably between 500 and 7,500 homes over the next 10 years.
Right. So that kind of growth, that's a great question, but that kind of growth is captured in these projections.
Okay.
So you can see Camden Water Sewer Authority has some pretty large numbers there over the next 10 years. So that kind of growth is covered by the consortium. The consortium wouldn't really identify, hey, there's existing population out in this pocket that we're now going to connect. So when I talk about large expansions, I really mean not growth or development related, but hey, there's an area here we need to go grab and connect in.
Harrisville, Linda Village.
Yeah, that's another good one, yeah.
And Dan, I want to expand on that too, because between 2005, 2000 and 2005, in those 5 years, we had more people move to Kent County than from 1970 to 2000. So this study goes from 2002 as revisions. We're missing 3 years of numbers in.
No, so we have the 2018 to 2022 is our starting point, and then we took growth projections based on the consortium from 2022 on. So we're starting from the 2022 basically and moving forward. So however they projected it before, we don't care. We just we knew how many people are here in 2022 and how much flow we have, and then we're projecting from that point forward. Okay. So those would have been covered. All right. Just a quick note on the underserved communities. There's only 3 noted by DENREC in their list right now: Twin Maples, Flying Dutchman, and Marathona Mobile Home Park. 2 out of the 3 are actually very close to existing service areas. The Flying Dutchman is the only one that's kind of out on its own. It's down in the Canterbury area, just off of 15, and so that's one that there's some other interest that we mentioned in the report as well, where there may be some other entities or businesses that could benefit from a new little service district. It's one that's if you're going to look for an area, that might be one to look at.
One of the ones that I would think that it should be served is Rising Sun, because it's very small lots. Majority of them have seepage tanks and a whole lot of drain fields. So somewhere's down, I would say in the near future, they're going to have to put sewer.
Yeah, so when the way those come about and the way those come to the county is typically 2 ways. One, DENREC says, hey, I need your help, go in there. The other one is petitions by the residents saying, hey, we want central sewer. Yeah, so those are the ones, so right now, there's a couple that have rumored out there, but there's no pending additions that we know of at this point. I think the message at this high level, we'll get to the treatment plan here, is that you'll have the ability to serve it. The question is the cost of service. And that really, you're gonna look at a project-by-project standpoint at that point. So you may do a study around that Rising Sun if you get enough interest. You may do something with, Flying Dutchman. But you have the ability to serve them. It's just gonna be how much is it gonna cost to get there.
So do we know if these, when you call underserved, I take it that specifically relates to the septic failing? Are they economically disadvantaged communities that would be eligible for something like CDBG funding or some other source of funding to underwrite the expansion?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And actually, I would suggest that the underserved term is both failing and economic related.
Okay.
Yeah. So DENREC had a little study done, and they have their ongoing list. So it's a combination of the two.
Okay.
Just let me point out that it's not Marathon, it's Maranatha.
It's actually written wrong in DENREC's, and that's why we have it listed like this. And we went back and forth about what we should put in there, and we're like, I don't know. So I think we actually updated in the report. I think we fixed it because we actually went out and verified it. But I think that this map didn't get updated, so we kind of debated that. So a quick overview of the collection and conveyance assessment. The hydraulic analysis, again, based on the projected flows, so we had that projection that we showed before, we're assuming that that is roughly correct. We have known issues, so the CIP is littered with known issues of pump stations and force mains. We wanted to see, did that make sense when we compared it to our model? There are some immediate force main needs, as I'm certain everyone at this table is well aware of, some issues with the force mains. The scary part is there's a lot of unknown needs. There's unknown issues that we don't have piping and asset condition, so we're not sure how bad a problem we have in a lot of areas, and we're gonna touch on that in a couple places here. Sustainability, we did look at sea level rise, climate change, flooding conditions. Depending on, there's a lot of sources out there. We're not making it up. We're not arguing if it's good or bad, but this is what the data says. And then prioritizing asset management and planning condition assessment. We think that's going to be a really important part of this next 20 years.
So we have about 500 miles of lines. I mean, that's a county administrator rough number, not an engineer's number, but is that in the ballpark of how many lines between force and gravity we have?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's...
I think it's like 550, I think is the combined number we provided to Alan for the insurance.
Yeah, it's up there.
So just as part of this, then having some kind of an O&M recommendation on how many miles per year either get inspected, TV'd, replaced, resleeved. I mean, because I presume we have a rough age of these facilities, at least by decade, so we know, we can guess. So is part of this study going to be at least some kind of a overview of this is what a good practice would be in terms of how many miles of line need to be replaced over the next 20 years?
So I would say that is one level of detail beyond the scope of this report. What this report is saying and trying to make clear is exactly what you're describing as asset management and the importance of being able to prioritize those. There has been work done on that, and we're heading in that direction. It's very, and that, sorry, let me go back one. That unknown issue, the pipe and asset condition, that all falls into that asset management bucket, and I would suggest that 20 years is too long to plan, and the asset management concept is that it's a continual movement. Like you said, how many miles of pipe do we need to do each year? And developing a robust asset management plan is a significant undertaking for any entity like this, but it's probably the most important one that you have in front of you right now.
And this is just our pipe, right? We're not looking at Camden, Wyoming Sewer and Water Authority, because they still have terracotta under the ground that they need to replace, but they're not doing it.
Correct.
So that 550 miles is just our pipe.
Correct. Anything that's outside of your boundary is addition.
Go ahead, Alan.
Under sustainability, I know you brought up flooding. One thing I've been pushing lately is because of the amount of tornadoes we've had lately. If that plant takes a hit, there's not going to be much left. Nobody's going to be able to flush. So, and I've been pushing for either a backup or, something else that needs to be done, or at least have that discussion. We haven't had that discussion, well, 21 years, looks like.
If I could come back to the treatment plant in a couple slides,
Okay.
that'd be a good topic to hit there. That's okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Hall.
Under pipe condition assessments, it seems to me that we have been laying money aside for this for a long time. And I thought it was already due to be started by now, but, so, and maybe you'll get to this, but in terms of financial tracking, how close are we to fully funding either the small pipes or the large pipes and getting this going, and what's that timeline look like?
So what we've done is we're leveraging ARPA money with DENREC loan. And we're at the point right now where we're applying for the DENREC loans for both projects. If you divide it up as small diameter and large diameter. So
Popped up
we're,
a couple slides.
there you go.
Oh, okay.
So there's the amount of money that we're looking at, but we're also looking at, using different funding sources
Right.
to make it happen. Originally, it was planned to be all loan. And this is part of what we did at the budget meeting in February.
Yeah,
We talked about using the ARPA money toward these projects with the idea that we can finish these before 2026.
Roughly about $9 million.
That's for the first phase here. So yeah, they got some big M's in there. For the assessment investigation for the pipeline greater than 12. So that's building off of the previous study that was done. And then you've got a study to figure out how to deal with the smaller ones. How much is that going to cost? And there's some guesses at what that's going to look like with the $4 million for the assessment. Where you can.
This still doesn't get us to when we determine what the projects are, or even while we're doing it, we figure out there's something we have to fix immediately. There's still going to be more projects coming out of this.
This is to figure out where you have problems. That's where this asset
Some
management is
problems we already
significant.
know.
So we're gonna spend over $9 million just figuring out where we got problems.
You hope that during that $9 million, you're able to leverage some of that to make some repairs as you go. But as it's written right now, you're investing. So I'll do my asset management pitch right now as far as why that happens. So we all have. I always liken it to a car. You get a new car, but you have to change the oil every 3,000 miles. You have to change tires. At some point that car gets old, but you've been investing it over time. A lot of people have the sense you put a pipe in the ground, you don't have to touch it again for 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, whatever that number is. But that whole time, if you're not keeping up with it, it's going to get worse and worse. And like the administrator mentioned, how much should we be doing every year? If there's a lot of programs, a lot of organizations that will have, hey, we're going to camera our pipe every 5 years. And we're going to see every inch of that pipe every 5 years. I'm not suggesting that's what you want to do here, but that's their mentality. And some of them are being forced to do it by consent decree. But we don't have any of that information right now. So we're starting from zero.
I'm the new guy, but I can tell you right now, that line from Legislative Hall up to where it crosses 13 up by Miko's needs to be replaced. And she showed me a map a week or so ago, and to me, you got competing head pressures, and I think that's contributed to blowing the line apart. You've got a force main coming in with more powerful pumps blowing against this, creating pressure blowing the pipe, and we've had, 5 breaks in 5 years? I mean, whoever designed that, I don't know, but I just looked at it in 5 seconds and said, there's your problem. So when that's something that needs to be corrected now. We don't need to spend $9 million to know that that's a problem.
So that is sort of what generated the Route 13 slip lining project that was completed a couple years ago. Is there was a certain point where hey, we know we have something going on here. We don't know what it is. Should we spend the money to study it, or should we fix it? And I think that's where you're up against in some of these places. Now, I'll to your point about the connected force mains and things like that. That's not unusual to have that, and I don't know that that's directly the cause of it. Our hydraulic model does model that, and we can see it.
Yeah, but usually when you bring another you got a big force main, you're bringing an auxiliary one in there, you bring the flow together so they're flowing the same way. You don't bring it in opposite so that both pumps are going. not rocket science.
So there's definitely hydraulic improvements that can be made in there. But even so, even with that, the pressures that you're running in these force mains they're not extremely high. Actually, in some places, we should have more pressure because we're getting air pockets. But it's mostly what we've seen is a condition issue where it's not, we're not blowing a pipe apart like we would think of, but it's because the pipe condition has gotten to a point where it's so weak it can't hold its pressure anymore.
It's deteriorating.
Yeah.
I mean, some of this pipe's from 1970, and the technology back then was nothing to what it was today.
Yeah.
I mean, you put plastic in, it's going to last a lot longer than. I mean, we're lucky we got 50 years out of this pipe. I actually looked at it, the one we just broke, and I mean, we're on borrowed time.
We certainly are. I think and we've been talking about a couple of different approaches here, and you've got some money that could be potentially coming down from DENREC, and you have to decide that. And in some cases, on the Route 13 project, it wasn't even that we could get in there to assess it. There's just no way to do it. We had to just get in there and deal with it as we go and fix it as we go. And that, I think there's certainly some argument that there are certain sections of the network that you probably should take that same mentality and let's go in there and fix it, and maybe we can rehab the other one as a bypass for redundancy. But there's also other areas that probably is not the smartest move to just go right to repair, and it's more cost effective to assess it. And you got to figure out where in that $9 million you fall on those and make sure you're making smart decisions.
No, I agree with what you're saying, but when you got 5 breaks in 5 years down the line, I mean, it's just going to break again. If we don't do something soon, we're going to have another break, and every time, what's this last one cost us, $500,000?
That's there. That's not necessarily the main focus of this report, but that's there. We have direction from you all
Yeah.
to move forward on that type of project.
Back up one here.
So that will be coming. That's not necessarily the full focus of the report. So again, that idea that if we need to fix it, we fix it. And then there's other things we might want to study. And I agree with you that that's an area where the 30-inch break was, that we're going to have to find an alternative. Because it will happen again.
So I just backed up one slide here, and I skipped over this one as we were kind of just talking through it. But so this is known issues. So you do have CIP projects that are specifically about replacement of force main, not studying it. We don't need to study it if it's broken. Let's go fix it. Same thing with a couple of pump stations. You know that some things you have to do there. So I don't want to give the impression that we're studying everything first before we take any action. There's already CIP projects on the books that need to move forward that are just, hey, let's go fix it. But you still have a massive group of assets that you don't have any information about. What you don't want to be is in this same position 10 years from now with the next group of assets, not knowing anything about it and having no choice but to repair.
Commissioner, it would be helpful, since I don't have the pump stations memorized, just to have, because when you talk about PS3 to PS4, just geographically, where is that, so I know?
Yeah, so in this case, PS3 is Dover. 3 to 4 is the stretch of pipe that we're particularly talking about.
And 4 is Locust Grove Road
Sorry,
and
yeah.
South State Street.
Okay.
And 3 is Legislative Hall or Punch
Yes.
and Run?
Like Hall, yeah.
What's Punch and Run?
Excuse me, Punch and Run is City of Dover Pump Station 33.
All right.
And Punch and Run is on the CIP too.
Huh?
Punch and Run is on the CIP, and there's also a DELDOT realignment that kind of.
That's the one that's coming in opposite on PS3.
Yeah, so there's already plans in place to correct that, and to, when DELDOT does their realignment with Camden, there's a whole lot of stretch of that 1970s pipe that we keep talking about that's already planned to be replaced.
But not the section that keeps breaking.
Correct.
And is the
Yeah, the
section that keep
Delta's
breaking?
not in that. That's why I was talking to her. If we replaced up to where that project starts, then when that project starts, put the new pipe in.
Again, that's something we can do as the capital project. And I see that coming as a capital project because we've talked about that and we see the need for that.
Another question I had, and she told me this, that we're not using the 8-inch force main from Capitol Park to PS3.
That wasn't the focus of what Dan studied. So
I'd have to ask the modeler where that stands, but.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we did put new pipe in, was there a way to hook that 8-inch in so that if we ever did have a problem and we put valves in there, we could use that and pump the water down to 8-inch back to Capitol Park, then let Capitol Park take it wherever it's taking it now?
Yeah, so one of the great things that's coming out of this is that we now have a tool where we can play that scenario out.
Yeah.
You know, that hydraulic model allows us to do those things and really decide whether that's a good thing to do, or if it's not really helping us. We have identified some pumps that are competing with each other that need to get on the list. So you now have a tool that you can really start doing those things. We've done a few of them. There's other things, but that's a tool that continues to get better over time, and you now can do that for the next 20 years.
Yeah, and I think the board understands that this is a long-range
Oh, yeah.
plan, and that we're talking about, what the planning horizon is, 20 years for this plan? I think Commissioner Hertz's concerns is, what are we gonna do in the next 20 months? And if we have, one of the things that would be helpful in the plan is to talk about these situations where, how do we go, because I think Commissioner Hertz is willing to go to engineering on this project tonight, to say, let's get the design started, because by the time we get through design and all the other necessary approvals we need to do, we're still talking months away from actually being able to get pipe in the ground. So I think the plan should reference, on some level, our ability to sort of react and do these major projects quickly, because, man, unless there's something else you think we should be doing, we should be waking up tomorrow morning talking about engineering on this job.
That's why I equate, that last break was 500,000. And so how I look at it, how many feet of new pipe with 500,000 buy us? And with 5 breaks, now you're talking 2.5 million. How many feet of new pipe would that have bought us had we put it in instead of spending on fixing a break?
So if we're talking about slip lining, as opposed, we're talking about that one, about building a new pipe. And I don't really have a number on a new pipe of that size, but I can tell you that the slip lining project costs $700 a foot.
Okay. So, I'm earning 2.5 million, that's how far you could have slip lined.
So
That's just how I think.
No, and we do have some discussion about that later. So I mentioned the Del Dot project that's realigning, and you're trying to time out that force main with it, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But that's one of the ones where we're saying, hey, you may need to go on your own first and be able and just move forward with it and have them come through there, because you may not have time to wait for them. But those are but you've got plenty of other work to do in the meantime. But we do have some of those recommendations here at the back end. So the message maybe I want to give you here on the CIP is one that you sort of alluded to there, is that your CIP is good. It is valid based on the studies that we've done. The projects that you have are good projects to move forward as fast as you can, right? And they're going to solve a lot of the things that we just talked about. So I think you can feel good about that and feel confident with that CIP list that you have. There's going to be more coming down the line. But whatever you can do to move those forward is going to be important. And I've got some of those recommendations at the end, so I'll push through on a couple of these things, and I'll skip over a couple other to let you guys guide how you want the discussion to go. But this is kind of what we've been talking about: prioritizing the asset management planning to make data-driven decisions, understand how you're spending your money, what is the best decisions to make there. The linear and vertical assets may require some different approach, but the CIP has some dedicated funding for some work order management software and the pipeline assessment. Push that as soon as fast as you can go, but you gotta work in parallel tracks with these capital projects.
Okay, just for the sake of, when you talk about linear and vertical assets, because someone from the public is going to want to know, is that when we're lying down or standing up? So could we try, to the extent possible, at least to get some plain layperson's language on those kinds of things?
So in the report, so this is kind of an overview of the report. In the report, we try to identify, when we're talking about linear assets, what does that mean? And in the vertical assets, we're mainly talking about the treatment plant, and it kind of says that. So I'm hopeful that the report provides that level. I'm trying to, keep it as time efficient as I can for you here. Just a quick touch on the sustainability review, because it has been a topic for a couple years, talking about things. We did overlays of flooding, projected sea level rise. This is, of course, your treatment plant down there, just to kind of get a sense of where things are. You can tell the property in and of itself is actually not bad. So we don't know that we're going to get overrun by floodwaters on a regular basis. I will caution that you have a pipe that's connected to all of these pieces that has a direct hydraulic push back up to the back end of your plant. And so that is something that we need to be concerned about over time, especially as your capacities increases. So we're okay from a land side of things, with the caveat that make sure we don't forget about that outfall pipe. We did the same thing on all of your pump stations as well, because we consider those dots on the map. There were some that came up within a screening level of, hey, we've got a few that are concerned. The one at Leg Hall is a big one where it's down in the floodplain. So there's a priority list of, as you're doing these capital projects, make sure you're touching on these things as they go through. There's some that you probably need to go out and look at directly. So we've identified those in the report as well. Most of these are going to be, let's make sure our electric doesn't get burned out. Let's make sure that our wet wells aren't getting topped. Not like, hey, we have to move these things completely. It's just there's some mitigation things to do. So moving into the treatment plant assessment, there's been obviously a lot of work done on this over the years. This is your major asset. There's millions and millions of dollars here as far as what you've invested into it for obvious reasons. I won't go through every single one of these, but there's been a lot of things going on at this treatment plant over the last 20 years, and a lot of them had to do with just coming up to current standards, current treatment levels that you need to be at that just were never there 20 years ago. So all of these have helped you get stepping closer and closer where you want to be. You just finished the generator project, and the air blower system optimization is active. That's getting close to the end. That's going to save you a lot of money over time. It's a great project, and one that will benefit you going forward in a lot of different directions. What we tried to do here is let's see what's going on right now. There's not a separate, there's a mini assessment done in here, but we really wanted to see what else was happening at the plant. You've got the aeration system that I mentioned, the biosolids project, which is ongoing. I know there's been some procurement issues there, but these are really, really important projects to make sure they go forward. It's because you've got some aging condition issues, but really getting these couple projects moving forward. Biosolids kind of sometimes gets put to the side because it's the byproduct of your treating of your water. But if you can't manage your solids, you can't treat your water. And so I'm a wastewater treatment geek. That's what I'd like to do. So I can go into that for a long period of time, but just want to stress how important that project is. And then we took a look at what you have out there with assuming all those things are in place. What does that look like? So we wanted to. The discharge permit 20 years ago was a big problem or a big unknown. You didn't know what you're up against. It was a major component of the report. We know what we're up against these days. The discharge limit has been through a lot of litigation. The loadings that you have, we don't anticipate to change. So I'll just point you to the left side, the annual loading. Numbers don't really matter that much. What I want you to walk away with this is with normal technologies and the loadings that you're allowed, you should be able to fairly easily, I'll say, treat up to 30 MGD if you're just looking at nitrogen, and easily 25 MGD if you're just looking at phosphorus, and those are usually your two limiting factors. So when we're projecting 20 years and we need to get near 19 and a half, feel good about where you are. That doesn't mean that you don't have to do anything at the plant to get there, but this is a point where you should be able to discharge the amount of water on average to this same discharge point. This is a good facility.
Again, excluding infiltration and inflow and high weather events.
Yeah, so storm events, like we talked about, is another thing, but we have to be able to handle them hydraulically. Yes?
So based off of this projection here, 22 years from now, you're going to be maxed out at your usage with everything going as a projected view. So if there is a increase over the projected use, then we're going to be somewhat in trouble.
So I would say we're not maxed out. So we're looking at 19 and a half, and I really would argue that the number for your phosphorus probably is up near 30.
But I think the recommendation is that we start looking at the design, and that's another slide coming up.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're going to touch on an expansion plan there, but from a total capacity, your trigger point is 80%. When you reach 80% of your design capacity, that's when you need to start planning for the next expansion. So that kind of helps you get into a time frame there. Satellite facility was another thing that was brought up in 20 years ago. That was brought up because they weren't sure whether they were going to be able to stay at this plant. We feel pretty good about you being able to stay at one plant. It's not cost effective to go to a second plant, just to go to a second plant, other than, you get a little bit of redundancy out of it, but from a cost standpoint, it was not cost effective at that point. It's not something that we would necessarily look at this point. Most places are trying to consolidate into a single facility as long as you have redundancy at that facility, which I want to talk about. I haven't forgotten your question yet.
I haven't forgotten you either.
So we wanted to look at what you have out there right now. The treatment technologies that you have are generally consistent with modern treatment facilities. There's ongoing projects that are critical that we got to get through there. The previous upgrade anticipated getting up to 20 MGD average daily flow, but we're struggling with peak flows. And so they're still remain challenging, and we still have aging equipment, like you talked about. We're lucky to get the 50 years out of the pipe. Treatment equipment is more 15 to 20 years at best. Some pumps are 5 to 10 years. So some of these are coming up on their age. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I kind of made my plug on this one already, but that biosolids is really important. And moving that forward, I do have a little blurb down here with an asterisk. You may have heard all the PFAS information. That is an emerging, that's an emerging issue both on water and wastewater, because now nobody wants to take sludge that has PFAS in it. And depending on where that goes, that's going to be a huge problem for the industry. But right now it's not. But I just have to monitor that.
It is on the water treatment side.
Well, depends on who you ask. If certain groups get their way and it turns into a hazardous substance, it becomes a hazard that has to go to a hazardous waste landfill.
Is incineration an option?
Not exactly. I mean, go ahead.
Well, there's a potential belief that it will go into the atmosphere and then redeposit in a different breakdown of components. So incineration may not be the answer. Landfill being like DSWA, which their leachate comes to us, also brings the PFAS back to us.
How much PFAS do we have?
Even a little bit's too much is the way if it's measurable or detectable, then it's an issue.
On the water side, the number is 4 parts per trillion.
Yeah.
But
that's the detection threshold, isn't it?
Well, that's the proposed regulation and the detection threshold, because it's as far down as they can go.
Trillion, not million.
Trillion. Anyway, I don't want to get us down a rabbit hole there, other than just.
Do you mention it in the report just because I don't know what the treatment? I mean, we talked about standard incineration, plasma gasification. Is there anything that would because other than that, because getting it to a hazardous waste landfill from here would be problematic?
It would be. I want to say catastrophic to the industry, because it's just so costly. So the way I look at it is that this is not going to be a singular problem for the county. This is going to be an industry-wide problem, and it's going to be one that's solved industry-wide. It's not going to be, hey, you got to figure it out on your own. No one's going to be able to afford it. And so there's going to have to be some joint solution or mitigation that goes along with it. We can treat it in water. We can treat it in drinking water, but that's going to be a lot of money to begin with. Treating the solids on the back end I can't imagine how much it's going to be. So,
a community that I was the manager of has a PFAS problem, and it's a community of about 7,000 people. And I think their first take at the upgrade of the water treatment plant is about $25 million. This is a city with a budget of about $4.5 to $5 million a year just to deal with this one water issue.
Yeah. I don't think we have the data or ability to address it at this time. It's just something to know about.
It is being studied. We have had samples done before. I got an email from DENREC either yesterday or today talking about they're starting their second phase of sampling, and they're going to be sampling on-site septic systems, and they're going to be taking more samples from the plant. So they're also looking at liquid side, and they're looking at the biosolids.
It's a chemical.
More information that I can bring
associated with
back to you
firefighting
all about
foam,
what's
in
going
case
on
that
with the
was
studies.
question.
I was just wondering which election this was going to hit on.
Well, the drinking water is going to come first, and they've already proposed the regulations, and they expect that to actually go in this year. But they're lagging behind on how they're going to enforce it. The amount of money that's out there, I just don't. It would make the infrastructure bill look like pennies. So, anyway, again, happy to talk more about it. But in the interest of time, I'll keep plugging along here. The assessment that we looked at, the most recent upgrades, even the recent ones, the UV expansion, the new clarifiers. We've got some new influence screens, which are helping. They're all typical for this type of facility. The aeration system's being upgraded. But the big heart of this thing is the biological process. In any wastewater plant, the biological process is your heart. It's the highest energy use. That's why you're going to the higher efficiency aeration. It's effective. It's robust, meaning it doesn't get upset quickly, but it's very inefficient. The life cycle management is very costly. You're going through a life cycle replacement for a lot of their equipment right now. And really, with the two basins that you have, and I've got a slide that'll help demonstrate this, but the two basins you have, you're really maxed out at your 20 MGD. There's really just not anything else there. So you're going to be faced in the next 20 years, and sooner rather than later, probably, do you expand what you have right now? Do you replace it with something different? And so we wanted to explore that just a little bit at this high level. And of course, it's easy to just say, okay, add another basin. You know, there's been a lot of master plans that have shown that and where that would look like. So this is, you can see the two existing basins, how big they are. We wanted to compare that with if you were going to replace both the existing basins and just go to what we would call a traditional mechanical plant, concrete tanks, diffusers in the bottom, mixers, different, and you have to have multiple stages to do what you need to do. What would that look like? And that's what's depicted here. So we would suggest a 5-train system. You can phase it so that you can keep the 2 basins in service, build 3 lines, switch everything over to the 3 lines, and then build your last 2. The important part of this is that it makes use of all the other investments you've made. Your clarifiers work with it. You're not going to a different separation technologies. Your filters work with it. Your UV, all the things that are around it. The blowers work with it.
And we're not saying that this is the answer. This is an alternative that was looked at by Honeywell. So again, I think the recommendation out of the report is that we need to look more at this.
We found that now.
So that's a possibility. That gives you an idea of the footprint. And that also, using that also gave us the first basin possibly to use as flow equalization. So there's other things that we would look to add when we're looking forward where we're moving. I think that was 23 MGD is what that layout gave us. I think it was about 4.5 MGD per train.
Oh, that was really a 20 MGD, but it also handles the peaks. We'd be able to handle the peak flows, which right now you can't. So they're designed, when we say a 20 MGD, we talk an average, back up one, we're talking an average flow, but these tanks are built that they can handle the big swings where your biolacs are not.
How much?
Here we go. So we did a quick look at what it would take just to see if it was anywhere in the ballpark. So the concept planning for just buying the equipment that you would need to drop into these tanks is $2.9 million, which in the grand scheme of things, that number is not terrible, but that doesn't include your concrete tanks, and it doesn't include some of the electric that has to go into it. But you also know that you're going to have to expand your basins regardless, and so it's not a direct comparison there. So there is a project on your CIP that was for 26-27, CIP T30, which is a wastewater process evaluation. That project we're recommending move up as soon as you can to do the full analysis of this and have your analysis done. Do you go to the third basin? Do you go to a mechanical plant and get the cost savings that you want?
So do you have, just ballpark us.
This is where engineers get in trouble. it's gonna be it's gonna be over a $10 million project easily, but I don't know. So I know it's double digits. I don't know how far up it's going in there. You could find out pretty quickly, where this is gonna go and whether it makes sense. Now, what you're comparing it against is, you have an investment of the third basin if you're gonna go that way. And you're gonna get, sorry, backing up, oops. You're gonna get the saving, you're gonna get a lot of savings. The other thing that we're dealing with here is the aeration blowers that you already bought just to supply the air for your two basins. If you go to a third, you gotta more blowers. Because this process is so much more efficient, you don't have to buy any more blowers, so you're saving that. So there's a lot of moving pieces in there that, when you're trying to compare the alternatives.
So your recommendation would be the 5-panel system?
My recommendation is to do this study to make sure that's the right thing. I think it's the right thing, my gut tells me it's the right thing, but I don't have, you need to dig in there and make sure it's the right thing. And you're gonna have to do that for the funding anyway, you gotta get a PER. I think that's where you probably wanna be. That's, again, my gut feeling.
So early on, we said that building a second site was infeasible, but now we're talking about $10 million. So building a second site would be twice, 3 times, 5 times?
So I'll give you a good point of reference. We're just completing so we're talking about 20 million gallons a day. We're just completing a 300,000 gallon per day facility for Chesapeake City, which is almost 10 million. That's the problem, is that it's you're getting a new piece of land, you're redirecting things, and it's so costly to build. You've got so much money in this facility already.
Did that include the land?
That did, but it was, the land was kind of the town's already.
With
Coming back, yeah, no, and so now, Mr. Angel, I want to answer your question. And I'll just use this as the example here. So every major facility that you have, so you've got to try and think about, okay, what can we proof it from? So we can flood proof fairly well. We can have redundancy in here so that if we lose one mixer, one train even, that we can do something. But when a tornado comes through, concrete tanks are going to be better than a tornado is going to rip up those basins and they're going to be gone. Concrete tanks are going to stand up a lot better than that. You may lose some equipment. I think you got a better shot at it. Most of your equipment out there and your tanks are concrete based. I'm not going to tell you that you're going to flush that next day, but it's also, there's a limit to how much you can proof it, right? And I don't think, my gut feeling tells it, multiple remote facilities, you're going to have the same issue there, and then you've got no other way to go to it. So I still feel like your major asset here, you try and make it as resilient as possible. But I'm not going to tell you that a tornado can't come through there and rip something up. Nobody can. But I think you've got a good shot at it here.
It could also continue and go on to the next location that could be a secondary treatment plant.
If that's still a concern, if you wanted to reevaluate that again, you could make that part of that study that I just mentioned and just say, okay, well, what would it take for us to do a 10 million gallon a day facility up north and compare that to what you would have here? I'm fairly confident where it would end up, but if that's something you want to do, that would be an alternative that would be appropriate in a PER.
Well, goes back to my questions. What if it did get hit?
Yeah.
What do we do?
You scramble just like you did with this pop down here at Carroll's Corner. You repair it as quickly as possible. You have to try and, like I said, the concrete is going to give you your best redundancy. I don't know that there's been that many instances where it's just come through, obviously not here, but globally where, you run into Katrina issues. What do you do? You do the best you can and you try and get it back online as soon as possible.
you pump a lot of raw sewage.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you're going to pump sewage out to the bay for a while, but you got to get it out of there, that's a tough one. It is.
I know I've been on record for over 15 years trying to get an extra air basin as a backup for whatever reason. I like the 5-panel thing, which you just showed. That was the first time that's ever been mentioned. So that kind of would do the same thing what I'm suggesting. So
it would, again, I'll argue that it'll do it better than the third basin,
Right.
but that's just my opinion. But I think a report will prove that out. I think a report will prove that out. I think that's To me, I think that that's the long-term solution there. Because you have to get to that. You're at a point now with your flows, you've got to get something else there, either a third basin or something new. And if you're going there, let's get the energy efficiency out of it at the same time. Coming into the end here, I know this is long, but again, I appreciate the dialogue. It's great, and I'll continue to answer as much as I can. I'm not going to go through any of these, but I just wanted to mention that there are a lot of existing needs and existing projects that are out there that need to be addressed or considered as you go forward. But the big picture, the take-home message here, from the last 20 years, the major focus was regionalization, expansion, and regulatory changes at your treatment plant. You've gone through that, you've worked through that, you've done a lot of great work. The next 20 years are really going to be on managing your system, aging infrastructure, which we're seeing, efficiencies where you can. So your treatment plant is in a good capacity state. It needs some upgrades, it needs some expansions, but you're on the right track. Your investments have been good, but much of your infrastructure, both at the treatment plant and in your collection and conveyance system, are at the end of their life. So that focus on asset management that we started off this discussion about is really critical. So expand your asset management, expand your CIP list. Don't just focus on the next 5 years. Have the next 5 years listed, even if they're not funded. Expand that list and try and work them up onto the CIP as soon as you can. Maximize your grant funding for the targeted projects, which is in process. And then that asset management program can inform the true cost of service, helps you justify rates, helps you justify your investments when their questions come up. Make sure you're spending the right money at the right time. So focus on that aging infrastructure, execute those condition assessment projects, accelerate that force main replacement, as Mr. Hertz mentioned earlier. There's no reason why we shouldn't push forward with those. That extended list that I mentioned, asset management, accelerate that wastewater process evaluation that we just discussed. If there are specific pump stations that you're upgrading, make sure you're taking care of your sustainability and resiliency. And then overall, and this has to be a joint project with the county and your contract users, address and reduce infiltration and inflow as much as possible. That's the end of what I was trying to get through, but happy to talk more wastewater. It's my favorite topic. I know it's not everybody's.
Go ahead, Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you. So is that Bard and Foe concept, is that the latest and greatest in new technologies for wastewater treatment plants?
Been around a while.
It's established. It's well established. It's at a large facility. It's probably the most common. The reason I hesitate a little bit is what you hear about as far as latest and greatest. You'll hear the term membranes. Membranes are not a biological activity. They are just a separation. They would take the place of your clarifiers and your filters, and they give you very high quality water, but you no longer need the investments of your clarifiers and your filters, and they basically do the same thing. You don't need them to make your permit. Even if you put membranes in here, so if somebody mentions the term membranes, you still have to build that 5-stage tank before the membranes. It has nothing to do with the actual treatment. All it does is just separate the waste from the water. So you would still need something like that ahead of it, even if you got rid of that.
And we need the flow equalization.
Yeah, and the flow equalization, especially with membranes, you need flow equalization.
And to speak to Commissioner Angel's point about any damage that's done at the treatment plant. If there's damage done, we have an easy mechanism to say, turn this off, and it goes straight through a pipe right out into the murder kill.
I would. Man,
Let's not talk about that here. Denright might be listening.
That is a interesting question.
That's
there.
I thought that myself. I mean,
it's an interesting question.
Or are we putting it in trucks and taking it to the murder kill and dumping it?
It's going to make its way to the murder kill.
Oh, yeah.
How it gets there might
So
not be
now I have to
important
look
right
at land, now I have to go back and look at land elevations of the properties there.
Yeah, so, well, it's going to, yeah, I could go back to the map, that flood map, but it's going to make its way out there. Regulatory agencies typically do not like to see bypasses where you can just shoot the whole gap. Most often, I've never experienced where you're just completely out of the entire plant. It's usually you maybe lose a process, maybe you have to bypass. Now we do have things like we bypass the filters. We can bypass certain things, but just to be able to take it and just shoot it right out there. No, there's not a pipe that does that, or a valve that does that.
So we come up with a project that involves sending a pipe in a particular direction, and we run out of money. And, and we just leave it until we get money.
It'll find its way
There are times
there.
where plants are underwater, though. I mean, there've been plants that have been where they're completely flooded out, so wherever it has to be diverted, bypassed, or whatever, but a plant that's got 6 feet of water in it is not operational.
So to the reverse of your point earlier, you can build a lot of treatment plants for the daily fines that you're gonna get if you don't do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
that's how I always equate things.
so
We've got.
there's money gonna be spent one way or the other, and it's better to spend it on your infrastructure than paying fines.
Well, this has been very informative.
Yeah, it really
Are you on
has.
the sewer advisory?
I am, sir. Actually, newly elected president.
I know I said.
Or no, I'm not on the supervisor board, the Board of Assessments is what you're thinking. Yes, yeah.
And you have a phone number?
Yeah, oh, it's not up there. 302, I'll give you my cell phone because it's the easiest. 448-9905, but I think I have cards up there too. I'll go run and get them. And Diana knows how to find me.
I've got his number.
The last time I heard a tornado going through Felton was in 1966, 67.
Oh, man, you're forgetting about the state fair.
Yeah.
We had the fair come through. I was out there parking cars.
Yeah, I watched it coming up the road tracks.
Yeah, it was going right towards the Ferris wheel.
The Malden trailers that were parked down the railroad tracks at that time.
I was out in the field
Was that when
parking
Vince
cars.
Gill was there? Because there was a tornado when Vince Gill played.
Yeah, that was scary. It came ripped up right by Uncle Willie's there.
Oh. When was that one?
That would have been 94, 95-ish, somewhere in there. I wasn't driving yet, so.
Well, 67, were you born?
No, sir, I was not.
That's funny.
Yeah.
But I was at the Vince Gill concert when the tornado came by at the state fair.
They were out there directing traffic, and we just see that funnel cloud, and I'm like looking at my boss, like, hey, are we going somewhere? He's like, our office is a trailer. Like, no, we're not getting at that. Anyway.
Thank you, Dan.
Any other questions I can have? Thank you. I'll see if I have some cards up there, but
Well, we can track you down too.
you guys know how to find me.
Thank you.
We'll just show up at Board of Assessments.
Thanks, everyone. I drank that.
We'll have to talk to Joanna about, or Diana about the solar panels being replaced. It's in here too. We bypassed it.
So when you have infrastructure, it you need panels, and then you also have the problem where the existing panels may not be available. So you have to find an alternative. But I thank you all for listening to our long-range wastewater plan presentation.
And now we're ready to move on to Whispering Ponds. Take it away.
So the item before you tonight is Whispering Pines Phase 2 Septic Elimination Project. We're looking to do a construction bid award. Following county policies, the project was advertised, and on May 18th, we opened 5 bids. The low bidder is Raybold Construction Group, LLC. We're looking to recommend an award to Raybold, and look to have the president authorized to sign the contract. The funding is State of Delaware revolving fund loan. We're also looking, and very important here, is that per county code, the Kent County Levy Court may waive district expansion fees and set the main system capital improvement fees, or impact fees for short, at non-increasing rates. So there's a motion, the second motion talks about waiving the district expansion fees and setting the main system capital improvement fee at the FY 2022 rate for the existing units within the park. So there are some vacant lots there. The maxing of the rate will not affect those other lots. When those lots connect, when the units are placed there, they will pay the rate at the time.
Okay.
So this is only for the duration of the project.
So this bid process was low bid, it wasn't that scoring system stuff.
Correct. This was a low bid process.
All right.
Dan, have
Any
you
other
ever,
question?
yeah, have you ever, I mean, are you familiar with Raybold?
Staff called and talked to some engineering firms. So Raybold normally does more of the subdivision type work. This project is construction of sewer in a mobile home park. So similar to constructing sewer for a subdivision.
Any other questions? Okay,
Is,
go ahead.
is it going to go to consent?
Do I gotta read that little thing first?
I
No.
don't know.
I don't?
We'll have to read that.
All right, go to consent then. 7 up, or 6 up, 1 absent. All right, next is the equipment purchase of the self-propelled dry spreaders, the bid award.
So we budgeted for a spreader used for our biosolids, taking it and spreading it on the fields. We received 3 bids, GVM, Southeast, and Huber. The low bidder was GVM. The budget included $300,000. The purchase is $463,250,000, so there is a shortfall. We can resolve the shortfall by reallocating $163,250 from prior year carryover for portable pump purchases. We currently have 6 pumps. 2 are new, 3 are rebuilt, and Colby was seeking information on the last pump, which is the oldest one. We do have $100,000 budgeted next year, and that should help us replace that pump. So for the plan as it is before us, with having to make a decision of how to fund this, that is our recommendation to use those funds to make up the shortfall. So there are 2 motions on here. One is about the contract award with a reallocation of funds, and then authorizing the president of Levy Court to sign the agreement and authorize the issuance of the PO.
Any commissioners have any questions? Nope. All right, then do we have a consent? 6 up, 1 absent. Good deal. That's it for you. Well, I have one question for you. Do you have any update on the dryers? What we're doing there?
So we're meeting with,
Andritz?
yes, we're meeting with Andritz and Arcan K on Thursday. Thank you
Okay.
for the help, Ken.
All right, good deal. Any public comments? I don't see none. Anybody? None online either? All right, we're good to go.
Thank you.
Next one's under me.
Next item on the agenda.
Yep.
Administration Committee, Commissioner Angel, you have 1 item there.
Mr. Quayler, you're up, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Angel. Commissioners, you may recall earlier this year you had approved some updated recommended assumptions for the pension plan, and that was so the valuation could be completed as of the first of the year. We do a similar valuation for our other post-employment benefits, which basically is retiree health benefits and dental and life. And that one is done every 2 years, and this is the year that it would be done. So the last time it was done, that was 2 years ago. And that is done as of June 30th. The Pension Review Committee looked at those assumptions that the actuary recommended for OPEB for the coming year, and they were very interested in how it might impact the actuarially determined contribution. And what they found by approving the recommended assumptions is it reduced it just a bit, not a big amount, I think it was $60,000, what they anticipated it would be versus with the current assumptions versus what it could be with the proposed assumptions. So with that recommendation, with that information, the Pension Review Committee has recommended that Levy Court revise those assumptions as listed here on the memo. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Quayla, any questions for Mr. Quayla?
Mr.
Commissioner
Quayle,
Sneed?
but Ken,
Hmm?
you have any expert advice?
Not really advice, I'm just not entirely happy with the $44 million of unfunded liabilities represented by both OPEB and pension, which is, I know there's sometimes in the budget where there's this, well, we've got money in reserves or we've got retained earnings in the sewer, but I mean, it's kind of like Commissioner Scott may have a new car, but if he's got $44,000 in credit card bills, not really rich. So those are concerning numbers given the economic situation we're in, and that I don't think that changes the assumptions. The numbers are what the numbers are. I mean, we have an aging workforce there. So, but those are really big numbers though, and the challenge it creates for the commissioners every year is we have to make the annual required contribution. And it means, like this year, one of the first things when I looked at our budget is that was going up a bunch this year, putting pressure on. So and we don't really have a good plan to catch up right now. I mean, there's an actuarial assumption that if we keep putting this money in for 20 years, you get to 100%, but that's not been my experience. So as we stabilize the budget, I think one of the conversations is for the board, do you want to catch up so the next 7 people sitting around this table have a fully funded OPEB plan and a fully funded pension? Because I don't have any quibble with the numbers, but there needs to be a broader conversation about a strategic plan on how to attack those two numbers.
Well, I know we've been funded higher before, correct?
So certainly in the past, the commissioners have added additional funds. This valuation will be not for the upcoming budget that hopefully you'll adopt next week, but the year after that. So since they do it at the end of the fiscal year, it's really being done not for FY24, but for 25, and that's why they'll need these assumptions.
But if you want to discuss a recommendation, one thing is if you adopt a policy that you have a certain amount in reserves, how many months of operating, at the end of every fiscal year, if we come in the black, we sweep that and it goes directly either into pension or OPEB. So instead of sitting on that money, we use it to meet those unfunded liabilities, which over time reduces the amount you pay in the budget every year. But if we did that, we would catch up and we would eventually have a fully funded plan for both retiree health care and for pension.
Because Ken, the idea, we're at 73% right now, and the idea is to be at 100.
And we're in 55% in OPEB, so we have more ground to make up there.
Right.
So, yeah.
Is that mainly because of the market though, too?
Well, certainly that does have an impact on it. This was driven a lot by you reducing your discount rate, your interest rate, or you made that assumption change, and that will be reflected in the next valuation. So that's driving up that cost a little bit as well.
But that was to bring that more in line with reality, right? I think when I first got here, it was fairly optimistic.
Well, actually, our return since inception has been around 8%. I hear that a lot, but for 27 years, we've averaged better than 8%. So maybe we'll have a really bad year where it's a problem. But
And we estimated this year at 6.75, correct?
we did reduce the pension,
Yeah.
yes. OPEB is just going down to 7.
Just for the edification for those who didn't know, but years ago, it wasn't funded for what, 7 years?
So actually, the pension fund got, and it was at 100%, which is kind of amazing that we are where we are now, and that's why, For those years, obviously, the commissioners could have chosen to continue to contribute, even though it was at 100% according to the GASB rules back then. But they chose to, not make those contributions and have more money than the actuary said they needed. And then I don't know that really impacted where we are. I think a lot of that impact, in my opinion, has been based on GASB they keep changing their rules. So you can be at 90-odd%, and then you'll be at 60% for a few years until you get back up to 90. So I don't know that 100%, well, I guess if you contribute a lot of money to actually artificially reach that 100%, that you'll really get there, because they'll just change the rules again.
How much do we put in every year, percentage-wise, per employee? Like,
Wow, per employee.
is it 5%, 6%?
I don't know that the report actually puts it like that. So we, this year, put 2.5 million in, so you divide that by 300. Where's Susan when you need her?
So what's our total payroll?
Well, the payroll for the current year was about 18 million. So for 2.5 is what the contribution is right now. As you see, it's going up a little bit because of the adjusted interest rate assumption.
About roughly 14%. I mean, nationally, the average for employer share is probably 12-ish for general employees. It's much higher for uniformed employees like police. In Delaware State Police, I don't know what their employer share is. In Maryland State Police, the employer share 75 cents of every dollar of wages is what it costs the employer to fund their pension plan. For local police, it's 35 cents per dollar for the match. For teachers, it's like 11 or 12%, just because of the cost and the main, how long do you have to work, what the benefit is, how long does that benefit last?
So you're saying 13.8%?
Yeah.
Per employee?
Yeah.
Well, and I'm not saying taking any current employee off their retirement plan that they got hired under, but should we look forward of all new hires, maybe going to a 401k where we match 6%? They put in 6%, we match 6%. Wouldn't that save us money 20 years down the road for the, like Commissioner Sweeney says, the next 7 sitting here? Wouldn't that be more, wouldn't that benefit the county down the long run if we're only putting 6% per employee? They put 6%, we put 6%, they invest it any way they want to do it?
Are you speaking about pension or OPEB?
Like a 401k.
As a
all
pension
new
replacement. I mean,
Well,
that's-
yes.
some jurisdictions have done that. Some jurisdictions have gone back to traditional. The defined benefit plan or traditional pension is where you work a certain number of years, you get vested. There are some states that have gone to a hybrid, or some local governments where you get a smaller pension and some 401k. And a few states have eliminated it for new hires entirely. But if you're saying, is it cost less money for an employer to do that? Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
but
an employee can put anything he wants in there. He's not stuck to putting 6% in. He could put 20% or 100% theoretically if he wanted to, up until he maxed out. And the county would only be on the hook to match at 6%, which I think is the maximum that you can do a 401k. I mean,
if you want to compete, you got to do it with your salary and your benefits.
well, that's competing with the real, with outside government, that's competing. I mean, if you go to KCI or any of these firms, that's what you got. You got 401k matched up to 6%. That's the max a company can match is 6%. That's what I got at my job, you know. I put 6% in, they match me 6%. I make 100% interest off the get-go. Then it depends on what I invested in, because like my company, we're with Vanguard. We got 20 funds that we can choose from. We invested our any way we want. So if we lose money, we can't say, well, oh, you lost my money for me. It's all on me because I picked a stock, you know.
But there's some, and I could be wrong because I don't know anything about it. So usually when I'm in that position, I speak more than usual. So, so if I was a young employee come in and I was told, you can put up to 6% and the county will match it, but I want cash in my paycheck every 2 weeks, I would probably forgo putting money into retirement thinking, well, that's so far in the future. And then when the future arrives, right, so you get more desperate as the time goes along, but you can't make up for that.
That's choices you make. You have a road and you can choose to put for retirement or not put for retirement. Leave it on them. Let these people have choice. Why do we have to govern everything we do? I'm looking from a county standpoint, what's cheaper for the county in the long run?
Sometimes cheaper's not always better, though.
Well,
And, you know, the thing is another choice they can make is they can look at it and go, well, the county's got a crappy retirement plan, but these guys don't. And I'm gonna go with Sussex County, or I'm gonna go with the state, or I'm gonna go.
I mean, what you're saying, yeah, what you're saying is 100% true. The county would save money, because right now the county employees pay 5%, am I correct, Alan? 5% is what they put in now
for their pension, yes.
for their pension. They
So
put
the-
5%
Okay, so it's no
contribution to it. But their payout for that pension is far greater than what a 401k is gonna be for
We'd
them.
never,
Depending on the life that they live, too.
we'd never, with public safety, we'll never compete unless we have a traditional defined benefit plan, because that's the industry standard for EMS, police, and fire. I mean,
That's
you're just never gonna
Long
hire.
and short of it, you're not
Yeah.
gonna compete.
So then the question is do you have an organization where you essentially have two classes of employees, the public safety and everybody else, which is already a challenge organizationally. So are you going to exclude the non-uniform employees from that pension benefit? Now, one of the things that I have suggested as a possible idea is, I mean, if we're contributing 14% to an employee on the pension, what about contributing 14% for an employee who opts out and says, I don't think I'm going to be here for 30 years, but at least then that employee is not getting shortchanged, and it's the employee's choice, and because then they're putting in, because if you're putting in, and I've been a pretty aggressive saver over my career, and I have not been poorly compensated. I'm not planning on living on what I have in my 457 plan. I mean, it would not come close, and I don't live an extravagant lifestyle, as evidenced by my beat-up old truck. It's hard, particularly for low-wage people, to save enough, because the real benefit from the pension is for the lowest wage employees to give them some kind of security. One thing I've also talked about in pension reform is capping the benefit. I mean, if you say, okay, we're going to have a pension, but if you earn above, we're going to limit the total amount that we'll pay out. So I'm okay with that as a reform, because it doesn't hurt the people at the lowest end of the pay scale. Because if you work here for 40 years as a custodian, retire, you're not living the high life on your pension here. But if you're a director, because what I make, I could afford to save a lot more than the average person, I'd be perfectly fine if someone said the most you're going to pay in a pension benefit any given year is X, and we're going to cap it to make it a more equitable benefit. So those are reforms that can lower the cost of the pension. Some states have increased employee contribution. In Maryland, teachers contribute 7% now, not 5%. There's other ways of lowering that cost too.
I think the county did that, because initially they paid 0, am I correct, Alan?
0, then
Now
1, then 3, then 5.
5. And their payout rate has dropped from 60% to 50% for today's IRA, correct?
The
On pension.
multiplier,
The multiplier
Oh, yes, it
comes out to about 50% now versus the 65% that some of them are getting. So, I mean, there has been some decreases with their pension.
but it's a marketplace for labor, and if you don't pay them in one area, they're going to want higher wages. They're going to.
Well, if you're paying 13.5 into the pension, you go to my plan paying them 6%, that leaves 7.5%. Split the difference, give them 4% more in their paycheck, we're still saving 3.5%. Now they get more money in their pocket. We're still saving money. And our plan will compete with the outside the government plan.
we don't really compete with the private sector to fill our positions.
We've never done that. I mean, all of our pay studies, we're looking at peer organizations regionally. We never
Yes.
said, compare us to Kraft Heinz or.
And a big reason for that is they won't share their information, private companies, not with consultants.
Well, the challenge too is that the 44 million doesn't represent the next 20 years of employees that the levy court hires. It represents decisions that, and I don't know, I'm gonna have to get with Alan, but I don't know, the math of how if we've earned 8% forever, we're somehow only 73% funded. Something had to happen somewhere along the line where we're short what we need to have right now. But even if you made draconian changes, we still have another 20 or 30 years of paying down this unfunded liability, because it's like turning a battleship. There's still going to have to be. One of the ways pension funds exist is you take contributions now for pensioners who are already gone. It's not a savings account that you get to hold on to. The actuaries calculate, some people are going to die early and not get the full benefit. Other people are going to live to be 100. Alan's going to live to 105 years old, I'm convinced.
Just had a guy Friday. We just had a guy Friday, 58 years old, passed away, never touched none of his pension. None of it.
And to Commissioner Hertz's point, if that was in a savings account, his heirs would
have
inherit
gotten
that,
Right.
which is a benefit.
If I die today, my kid gets all my 401Ks.
Well, if you adopt me, I'll take one of the cars.
It was fortunate, the business meeting.
What you're saying is not
Good
wrong,
idea.
by no means. It's not wrong. I think this
7-Up.
needs to be.
Any public comments? Any public comments? Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, commissioners.
Commissioners get a pension?
Did, we'll put it on consent.
Okay. I was just curious. I didn't know, I had thought to ask
I
that.
think after 8 years, that'd be here.
Oh, you have to win 2 elections.
Yeah.
Yes.
Isn't that right? 8 years.
2 elections.
And then that
Yeah.
403 or whatever.
Used to be
it is.
3.
So what would happen if someone had a partial term? So it has to be, so let's say, what happens if someone like,
That'd be 8 years.
8 years. Yeah, it's not 2
so
elections.
if
it's 8
somebody dies
years.
in office and you come in and fill like 3.5 years of a term, and is it governor appointed or does the levy court appoint?
Depends on how far out it is.
Yeah,
If it's
Within a year,
usually
isn't it?
more than 6 months, then
and it depends on commissioners versus row offices, because row offices are appointed by the governor.
right. Yeah, so if it,
As if you've given thought to row officer expiring for some reason.
I neither confirm nor deny.
it depends on how much time's left on the term.
Yeah.
If it's a short amount of time,
Just run light one member for a little while, or?
yeah, we can do that, or the governor could appoint somebody,
Or you can,
or I can.
yeah.
Oh. So, has that happened?
Yes.
Well, it was a special election when
Don Blakey won.
Don Blakey won.
You want,
Hausfeld was.
Hausfeld too.
yeah.
Was Tom Wyatt, did he leave and Senator Cook came in?
He retired.
Retired.
He retired.
Yeah.
Didn't fill out his term.
Right.
Senator Cook came in and filled out the term
After she retired.
Appointed by the governor.
appointed by the governor.
From a safe seat for another office and maintain your office while you're running for like state delegate, or you?
Yes.
But if you win,
Have you checked into that, Jeff?
I was bored one day and I started flipping through.
Yeah, if you win it, you have to give up your
have to
seat,
resign
but,
your seat,
but if it's not a safe seat, you gotta pick one or the other, right? If you're,
Yeah, Buxton had to pick between levy court and senator.
okay.
That decision was made before he ran.
Back to you, Mr. President.
All right, Craig, do we have anything tonight?
No, sir.
Okay. Are you finished with your workshop items?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir, great.
So we are adjourned.
I didn't know you guys had a pension. That's, how many pensions is that gonna be for you, Commissioner? I mean, you're gonna be up to 5 or 6 of them by the time.
Oh, because you're out of town.
So,
Are you making more as a retiree than you were before? Have you?
Oh, yeah. Are we doing leadership tomorrow?